Welcome to the Savvy Dentist podcast with Dr. Jesse Green, the show where great dentistry meets great business. Listen in each week as we bring you an inspiring person who will share their story, ideas and business techniques to help you create a practice and a life you love. And now introducing your host, Dr. Jesse Green.
Hi everyone, it's Jesse Green here. Welcome back to SavvyDentist.com and to the Savvy Dentist podcast, the show where great dentistry meets great business. Now my guest today is an entrepreneur's entrepreneur. He's responsible for many of the brands in dentistry that we all have heard about, we all know, but he's the quiet man behind the scenes. So you might be familiar with Noble Dentist, you might be familiar with Smile.com, and you might be familiar with Dental Members Australia. And the man behind all of those is Dr. Safa Souzani. And what I really appreciate about Safa is the way he thinks about things. He's really innovative in his thinking. He thinks outside the box. And in our conversation today, we spoke about a lot of things. We spoke a lot about business models, how to create recurring revenue in a dental practice. We spoke about thinking about joining the dots, several businesses down the track. We spoke about where he sees the practice world going and a bunch of other things. Now, Safa is someone who I believe is one of the great business minds in dentistry. Even though some people may not have heard his name, he's been massively influential in shaping the profession in Australia. I think he's an absolute thought leader. I think he's really clever when it comes to business, and the things he shares in today's conversation are just absolute gold. Lots and lots of pearls of wisdom. Now, I'm going to tell you, we had a couple of internet challenges as we were recording this, so I'm going to apologize for quality of the audio, but the content is so good, I just have to share it with you because I know there's a bunch of things in here that you're going to have to write down, apply for yourself, and get some great results. So I really want to commend this episode to you. Now, on a different note, on September the 5th, we are having our Practice Mastery event. And the reason we're running this event is because we know that 2020 is only 2/3 over. And yet, in spite of that, there are some people writing the year off, kind of just hoping to do a do-over or get to 2021 as quickly as we can. And in spite of everything that's happened, I know that the best teams are the ones that win the championship in the back half of the season or the back quarter of the season, and we're only 2/3 of the way through the year. So this event is really designed to give you the skills, the knowledge, and the tools to finish the year strongly. We've got some wonderful guest speakers. Dr. John DeMartini from The Secret. Many of you will know him for his work on mindset, leadership, teams, and so on. He's world famous. Our second speaker is Brent Tilson, who's the author of probably my favorite business book, which is Go Slow to Grow Fast. And that book has shaped me in more ways than I can even imagine, and it is by far my favorite business book. Brent's a thought leader in America. He's coming over to talk about putting the foundations in your practice, what to measure, how to measure it, the things you need to have in place to not just grow, but to be able to scale if you choose to. And our third speaker is talking all about negotiation, the things he's learned from his background in the intelligence communities in the United States. Dr. David Fries is going to be coming to talk about things he's learned in that space, negotiation tips from FBI hostage negotiators, things learned from CIA interrogators, and a variety of other people. And this is all about giving you the skills to be able to negotiate effectively, coupling that with the skills you're going to learn from the other speakers to set up 2020 for a really strong finish and to make 2021 a cracking year as well. But 2020 is still in play. The championship is still up for grabs, and we want to make sure that 2020 is a great year for you, irrespective of what's happening or what's gone before. We know that we've still got 3 or 4 great months to make a big difference and finish the year, ahead of where you thought it would be, and to make 2020 still your best year. So I hope you'll come and join us on September the 5th for that particular event called Practice Mastery. All you need to do is go to SavvyDentist.com/events, and you'll find more information about that event. We can't wait. It's going to be huge. You're going to love it, and we hope to see you there. But for now, I want to introduce you to Safa Souzani, and I know you're going to love this episode. So as I said, have a pen and paper handy. You'll absolutely love it. Here he is. Safa, welcome to the Savvy Dentist podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time to come and speak with us today. How's things with you?
Very well. Thank you very much, Jesse. It's very kind. I'm very appreciative to be here with you. I've heard your podcasts over the last few years. I've listened to some very interesting ones. So I'm grateful to be here with you today. I'm really, really am.
I'm grateful that you're here too. And you've got I think, a very interesting background. You're Obviously, you're a dental practice owner. You've got lots of experience in clear aligners, but you've also got experience in other businesses and other ventures as well, computers, automation, membership programs. Like there's a lot of things that you've done in your business journey so far. So I'm really looking forward to going through some of those experiences with you and just learning from you about what you've discovered, what you've done, how you've done it, what you've learned, dare I say, where things might not have worked out as you expected and so on. But before we do get into that, I want to ask you probably a question that might sound a little bit peculiar to ask up front. But with that diverse background, practice ownership, clear aligners, computers and automation, what is it that has made you go into all those different areas? What drives you, Safa?
That's actually a very interesting question, Jesse. When I first started doing dentistry and I was a practice owner at a young age, and I was doing well, I found that very quickly I'll be looking for other things to do. And soon I learned that to make myself happy, I actually need to be doing different things, and the whole process of doing something, starting from nothing and building it, is what actually really interested me. And I find whenever I actually start doing very well financially with practices, practice ownership, moving on to, I sort of tend to stop and then move on to the next thing. So I guess it's part to do with my personality, I would say. But I'm quite aware what makes me happy, Jesse. I am actually quite conscious of that.
That's a really interesting thought because, you mentioned just a moment ago that when things get up and running and they're going along successfully, you shift focus again. Do you find that obviously you enjoy that creation, startup, all the energy, the creative process that's involved in that? Do you find that, and again, I don't want to put words in your mouth, does the day-to-day operation of something, does that start to bore you after a while or not?
I'm not sure if it's bored, but I know the dental practice journey, as a dentist, that has always been the core of my business.
Yes.
And the challenges with the dental practice don't go away. No challenges go away. You just learn to adapt better.
Yeah.
You become better at dealing with all the things that come with the dental practice. But a lot of the things that I have done have been involved with dentistry.
Yes. And
the reason for that is I've wanted to expand to more dental practices to implement this new system, whether it's a membership program, whether it's a noble dentist where I, did as a very young age, mid-20s, which was a membership card for dental practitioners and so on and so forth. So all of it has been involved with something to do with dentistry or computers or marketing, which has been a great focus of mine. Yes, and that's what actually makes me happy. But having said that, there's a lot of failures that come with that because when you start something new, it does actually take time to get profitable and get going.
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing too, isn't it? Because people say in my line of work, Jesse, do you do it for the money? And I often say if I was doing things just for the money, I would have just stuck with dental practices, because as you very clearly articulated, when you start a new venture, your focus has to go to that new venture and that comes with a consequence or a cost elsewhere. And so I think that, for anyone listening to this and you're thinking about other ventures, it's really important to understand that all of us have a certain amount of energy. All of us have a finite amount of energy and a finite amount of time. And where you give your energy to something, by definition, you're not going to be giving it to something else. So perhaps getting things set up and running before you go on to your next thing is always a good plan. On the creation part, Safa, I want to ask you, because you have had such a rich and diverse background, whether it's the Noble Dentist, now Smiles.com or now dental members and clear aligners. Where do you find your creative ideas come from? Because I find for me, most of my creativity comes from examining other industries and looking at what's happening in other industries and going, how can I make that relevant to dentistry? And indeed, that's the premise of this podcast. What's happening in business and how do we make it relevant for dentistry? I'm curious to ask, where do your ideas and inspirations come from?
Very similar to yours, actually, Jesse. I know that most of us all of the time have ideas that come in our minds. And every now and then we sort of get up and we want to act upon them. And the moment we act upon an idea, whether it's a good one or a bad one, you just don't know. And the moment you act and you take that first step, then something else happens. And then before you know it, you've developed it and it's like a little child, if you would, and it starts growing. So really, I've had many ideas that come and go in my head, and most of them happen while I'm in the shower, to be honest. And from there, when you act upon one or two of them, they take their own hold. But of course, there is a price to pay in that, I remember back in 2009-10, when I started Dental Members, I had visited Scotland, and I had a friend, Dr. John Barry, who ran a dental membership program in Scotland for over 200 dental practices. And I remember thinking, I went and visited him and saw all the practices, and I remember thinking this can be automated now with this cloud computing technology.
Mm-hmm.
But to do that, of course, I had to stop doing dentistry. I had to go to Melbourne. I had to find a team and live there and develop the software for it. So there is a cost to pay to an idea as well, because once you start, as you said, it might have been better off for you just to be doing the dentistry, which is, we're very lucky to be in this field because it's a good field. It makes a good living. So yes, the ideas sort of take you on hold. But I know, as we've discussed, when you have an idea and you work on it, it makes you happy. It certainly does for me, the progress.
Yeah.
And that's what's happened with me.
Same with me, actually, Safa. I find that probably a bit like you, that creative process is really interesting and stimulating for me.
Yes.
And I think the other thing too is it opens up conversations with people that you might otherwise not have had the opportunity to talk to or learn from or discover new things or whatever it is. And there's a real learning process, I find, that goes with it.
Absolutely.
Safa, I would like to ask you a little bit about Dental Members, because obviously I've been familiar with Dental Members now for quite a while. I'm aware of some of the work that you've done there, perhaps not aware of all the intricacies of what you've got in place there. But I'm curious to ask, because one of the things that's fascinated me around looking at other industries and thinking how we can apply that to dentistry is the concept of monthly recurring revenue. And that's been something that's been rattling around in my head for years and years and years. And obviously, the work that you've done has put that in place with Dental Members. And I'm curious to ask you, what was the impetus for thinking that was a great idea? Obviously, you went to see your colleague in the UK, but what's the problem that you were looking to solve with Dental Members?
Jesse, I remember when I first had started, and I had associates, colleagues that I was working at dental practices. I remember associates would come and work, and after a year or two, this is probably 15 years back now, would move on and do their own thing or open their own practice. These days, not so much. Opening a practice is sometimes not a great idea as it used to be. And I remember thinking it would be great, and I had some experience, of course, with Noble Dentist and membership programs. I remember thinking it's a great model. The subscription model, I remember back in 2010, 11, thinking this is a great model and it can be implemented for dentistry. And then I found out that this was actually happening in the UK. So I started working on a software program that was able to do direct debits, and it was specifically for dentistry. It had dental item codes on it, and the membership fee could be changed. And it's exactly what you said, the whole concept of recurring revenue, where patients come to the practice not necessarily for the dentist, but for the practice provides. And that was the whole premise of that. And I used to think, if the practice has 500 members, paying $30 a month, that's $15,000. And if their tooth breaks, they probably, as a member, would like to come back to that particular practice because they get member benefits, whatever that may be, 10% off or, a member service. So that was the whole premise of the business idea of a membership program specific to a dental practice.
Yeah. So again, I've been looking at membership as a business model for years as well. And I really appreciate what you've said there, because the concept of those member benefits is really key. And there's obviously lots of ways you can bundle things in with membership. But I think from the practice owner's point of view, one of the great advantages of having a membership platform is, obviously there's the monthly recurring revenue. There's the retention of your patients, which you've just spoken about, because that creates a bit of stickiness with the practice. And particularly, as we're talking around this at the moment, you and I are recording this as Victoria has gone into a second lockdown related to the coronavirus situation. It would be nice to be able to have that monthly recurring revenue coming in to fund whatever it is that needs to be funded in the practice. So again, it provides a bit of a shock absorber against situations that some practices would currently be experiencing. Would you think that's a fair assessment?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And interestingly enough, what we found with the stats with these members is that a lot of patients become members and then they actually don't use the member service. And the figure was so high, 20-30%, that it was becoming a accounting nightmare, because the accountants were saying, look, this money is coming through, but where is the work getting done towards this money? And then you delve into a whole new psychology of people who want to be members, don't utilize it in case they use it. And it's the whole system of, becoming a member of a gym, if you would, and actually going to the gym 3 times in a year, you're paid for a whole year's membership, and you don't really want to cancel in case you do want to go one day.
Yeah, it's an interesting psychology. Did you get to the bottom of that? What's beneath that?
We could never figure it out, Jesse. And, you may know, I worked with a mentor of mine, Dr. Darryl Holmes, Darryl with 1-300, and we implemented that for all the practices there. And we just couldn't get at the bottom of it. I mean, we had, well into the 5-figure members, and we couldn't figure out what the story is with these patients. But I remember at the end, we had decided that these funds need to go into a sort of a balance sheet. And then, of course, they expire, because if you're a member for 1 year to, scale and clean twice a year, exam and x-rays, if you don't use it, you can't come in and suddenly get three scale and clean of fluorides in a week,
Yeah, exactly.
So I guess it's just the psychology I couldn't understand, but I guess that the closest thing to it is becoming a member of something and, barely using it. But having said that, I'm a member of Netflix, as you probably would be as well, and a lot of people are. But I can't actually, I don't think I've watched Netflix in the last 2 months, but I'm not going to just cancel my subscription.
Interestingly enough, I did cancel mine actually, Safa, and I'll tell you why. It wasn't because I was not using it, it was because I was using it too much. And I would actually, the most fun I ever had writing a blog was the very first blog I ever wrote, and it was a breakup letter to Netflix, and it was coined as a dear Netflix, it's been great, but we need to break up kind of letter. And so we cancelled our subscription, as I said, not through lack of use, but because we were binging well into the night and waking up exhausted. So it was the opposite problem. But you're absolutely right. There's a lot of people with subscriptions that don't get used, and I think we've all probably got 1 or 2 of those, probably more than 1 or 2.
Yes.
So I wanted to just ask you, going back to the idea of creativity, having ideas. And as you said in the beginning, not all ideas come to fruition the way that you expect them to come. Not all ideas become that next $1 billion idea. What have you learned in that ideation process of thinking about your ideas, evaluating your ideas, and then ultimately having some sort of inkling, hopefully, of whether they're going to fly or not? What's the filtering process that you go through? And then the second part of the question is if you've had something that hasn't, succeeded, what lessons came out of that for you?
I guess the first part of your question is one of the most important factors I found is if I was to stick to something long enough, it would actually eventually start making sense.
Yeah.
And it will eventually do well. And that was a big factor too, because as time goes, you learn to become more flexible and understand and change the systems around and become better. And this has even happened recently where we sort of implemented the membership program or the direct debits for our clear aligner business.
Mm-hmm.
And we started manufacturing our own clear aligners out of Colombia and implementing it in 6 practices of our own.
Mm-hmm.
And I managed to get to, 100 clear aligners a month in sales. And that was the first step, but that alone isn't enough to have aspect. The reason we got to 100 because we understood direct debit, we understood membership, we understood the marketing that was required, but we didn't understand the clear aligner business. So here was another channel.
Yep.
We didn't understand that if we don't meet the patient's expectations, it could actually start costing us money because we have to do refinement trays. Refinement trays cost money. Clear aligners is not like a filling where you do it and it's finished. Things can happen along the way. So every little thing then has its own new challenge. And if you like the challenges and you expect them and you react well to them and you actually learn to adapt to adversity, really, to things not working out, to fighting fires every day. When you become better at dealing with that, and then you can actually progress into the next stage. You don't give up too easily because you think you understand that pain is only short term, and to a lot of my associates, younger generation now, in their 20s, when something goes wrong or a patient is unhappy or they get a letter, I always put it into perspective for them. I go, look, you'll look back and you won't think much of it, in time. It's just that you're in it now and things don't change. Complaints do come out of, 1 out of 100, and you just become better at dealing with them, really.
Yeah. So what I'm really understanding here, Safa, is this notion that one idea leads to another, leads to another, leads to another. And what I'm hearing very clearly is, you've been working in that membership model for a long time, and now you've adapted it to the clear aligner business. You could probably adapt it to some other business as well, and so on and so forth. So again, for people listening to this particular podcast, I think it's really important to understand that your first idea is the one that leads to the second and then to the third. And in my experience, Safa, and this might be different to yours, but for me, it's usually been about the third iteration or the third step in that process where suddenly things start to come together and you go, okay, now I'm seeing how the dots are joining, or now I'm seeing how I can take that thing I did a while ago and make it relevant here. But you've got to stick with it long enough to get to that point, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You just have to stick with it long and scratch the surface and get deep and be prepared to lose, really.
Yeah.
And then something does happen, and then, the dots become better and clearer. That is exactly, you've coined it extremely well there.
Yeah. So, look, I'm curious to ask about your clear aligner business. And I know you've written a book, which is Clear Aligners, All You Need to Know. And for those people who are interested, you can find that book at dma.com.au/book. But can you tell me, where you see the clear aligner business going? Where do you see clear aligners as part of general practice? What's the mix like? How do people introduce it into their practice successfully?
Sure, yes, and that's exactly, we started that. And actually the book is mainly written by a business colleague of mine, Dr. Nick, who was the mentor dentist in Dental Members Australia and was teaching the dentists in our organization to do clear aligners successfully. And when you get to bigger numbers, more than 2, 3, 4 a month, you need systems in place. And essentially, Nick wrote this book for the dentists to save them the headaches that we were starting to experience.
Right.
And it really depends, Jesse, with clear aligners in dental practice, whether I've become well in defining what we really want really well. Because if you, for example, want to become extremely good at clear aligners, then and do 2 or 3 or 4 cases a month, and then it's better to charge, a decent amount of money because it takes time. It takes a lot of learning. Of course, when we began this, we wanted a model that was affordable, that patients could pay with a monthly fee. It was more cost effective than a laboratory like Invisalign. So our systems were very different. We focused only on straightening the 6, 7, 8 front teeth. We didn't focus on the bite. We weren't accepting patients that went over 60 or 50 weeks. So it really depends on where your definition is. By this time, I had learned that if I was to complicate things, you can never expand it. You can never become implemented in multiple models. So for a dental practice owner who wants to implement a system, it depends what really they want. If they wish to do clear aligners themselves at 2 or 3 cases per month, the systems they should implement should be very different to someone who wishes to have their associates do clear aligners, because then that's a different story.
Okay. So can you just walk us through a couple of the traps for young players here? If I'm a practice owner, I am a practice owner, but if I'm a practice owner and I'm thinking, I want to be able to do the aligners myself, and in addition to that, I'd like my associates to be doing some aligners, and my associates have expressed an interest in doing aligners, I should make that caveat. Where do people come unstuck? Where do people kind of go, this sounded good at the beginning, but now it's all too hard? What are the things that trip them up?
I think at the beginning, there is this honeymoon period, if you would, Jesse, where things are actually pretty good. Patients accept the treatment and you can start the treatment and you've done courses and you know how teeth movement works. The problem is thereafter, where because it's an aesthetic cosmetic product, patient expectation may not be met. And from there, you'll find that, you have to do more work. And then if you look back, you look at the number of appointments you've spent with this patient, your laboratory fees, all that sort of thing. Then you come to the conclusion it would have been better for me to do a one surface filling and a clean.
Yeah, got it.
And that is the reality of anything like this.
Yes.
However, I'm not saying that, it can't go well. It can, but I'm very good at not accepting particular cases. So if anyone is beginning, I would say setting the right patient expectation is very important. Very clear notes on that. One of the things we say to our patients is don't expect perfection, expect an 80% improvement. So this was something that we practiced with our associates because we knew what would happen 8 months down the track. We always would say to our patients, and we still do, look, if you're doing clear aligners, expect that you will be needing refinement trays, and the cost for those is X. Expect that you would need combination treatment. And what that is that you add composites, bonding on your lateral incisors or your incisors to make them improve. And then if you're still not happy, bear in mind that we may refer you to an orthodontist to maybe cancel the braces. So by setting those expectations very early on and patient communication, suddenly the world becomes much easier.
Yeah. And one of the things I noticed you said earlier was case selection. And this is probably interesting from a clinical point of view, but from a business point of view as well. My ears pricked up as soon as you said that was, you're focusing on the anterior, 7 or 8 teeth, and you're not adjusting the occlusion. You're not, getting into the complicated cases, right? And so clearly, again, that comes back to the patient expectations, which you've just spoken about. But from a business perspective, what I really like about that is you've got one thing that you master and you're not trying to be all things to all people. And so that means you're able to scale that.
Absolutely. And that is the key if you as a business owner or a practice owner wish to expand something. Because to expand, you can't go for perfection. For perfection, if you wish to go that way, then you actually need to charge a lot of money, become very, very good and specialized in that, have a team that can help you. And, I see some of these gurus on social media with some of the work that they do, and I'm always amazed, the various cosmetic cases and composite veneers. And, to do something very well takes time, takes years, and it should obviously be rewarded very highly. But if you're thinking of a scalable business where an associate 3-4 years out of university and a patient where, moderate income wants to improve a little, and you can't be selling the story of perfection.
No. And I really like that. Again, one of my business heroes, Safa, is Steve Jobs. And, he's probably a hero to, a lot of people around the world. But it reminds me of the story in a sense that when he came back to Apple, having been effectively kicked out, but when he came back, they had a really complicated range of products. They had, all of these, different devices, printers and so on. And what he did when he came back, or one of the first things he did when he came back, was to simplify the product offering, to reduce the number of options available. And so they could focus on doing 2 or 3 things really, really well. So with that thought process in mind, how important has the ability to focus on 1 or 2 or 3 things really well been important in your success in life, rather than trying to do all these different things, the things that you could do, going back to the ideas that we spoke about earlier, there's no shortage of ideas. Okay. You stand in the shower and get your ideas. I go running and get my ideas. And so then we've got to be able to say, what do we do? What don't we do? And so on. So I'm curious to ask you, by limiting your options or by limiting the things you commit to, how important has that been for you in your life?
Very. And that has been a learning process for me, Jesse, over the past 20 years now, to actually be able to simplify things, to make them simple. And at the moment, with this particular book, we've Nick's put it all together, and one of my colleagues, Dr. Jeff Hall, who's helped us a lot. And we've been getting feedback on selling this book to the UK, Canada, US, and Australia, and it's doing very well. And I did get a feedback the other day on an email saying, look, the book is really great, but it's very, very simple. I've done many, many courses, and, this isn't, it's very, very simply written. And it actually, I felt that it had done its job, because for a general dental practitioner, if it is complicated, Jesse, you could actually lose thousands of dollars with a procedure like clear aligners.
I really like the fact that you've used that model of simplicity both clinically with the case selection, with the clear aligners, as well as with your business focus. So again, for anyone listening to this podcast, you might be listening to this from the point of view of wanting to do clear aligners. And what Safa's saying is, choose your cases, know what and just replicate that thing that you do really well. And equally, if you're listening to this podcast thinking about, how do I, grow my business and do the other things, then again, I think, keeping it simple and sticking to one thing and executing that really well gives you the opportunity to scale up. And I think, again, you can look at this particular theme, from a clinical or business mindset, and I really appreciate that. Safa, I want to ask you a couple of things that are perhaps unrelated, but I want to be able to draw, or they're not unrelated because I want to be able to draw them back around. I want to ask you, in your life, who have been the people that have shaped your thinking the most?
I guess I would say growing up would definitely be my father. We were originally, I was born in Iran, and my father was in the film industry, as was my mother. And when we emigrated to New Zealand, my father opened up a French bakery, and he had a French bakery business, and he managed to expand that business. And as a young kid, I used to work in the bakery, cleaning bakery trays. So I guess that has been an important factor for me growing up until the age of 16, 17, until I sort of moved on, went to university, and then came to Australia. And then thereafter, I have worked with some fantastic people. I've got to say, Jesse, I've been very, very lucky to work and have friends in dentistry that have really helped me. Dr. Darryl Holmes has been a great mentor and someone that I've worked with over the last 10, 11, 12 years. Harry Margay of Melbourne, Dr. Harry, who we've been friends for 10 years. And Harry is great. He doesn't let on how much he knows, but some of the advice and some of the things he's told me from 7, 8 years ago, only now I realize what he was meaning, what he was saying. So it's funny. The funny thing is, a lot of people will give you help and will give you advice, but at the time you don't quite believe it. It's only years later when you experience it, you go, that's what they meant.
Yeah.
But I wish when I was in my 20s, I wish there was what it's available now, a coach where they would ask me some pinpointed questions to help me along my journey, because now I understand that value, the value of the coach, and of course the end, because sometimes you actually don't know. The saying that the grass is always greener on the other side, it does ring true, because sometimes it's not the case.
Yeah, absolutely. Safa, I really want to say, from my perspective, your journey is a really fascinating and an interesting journey. It's intriguing, it's exciting. There's been lots of things that you've done, things you've achieved, thinking outside the square, bringing influences into dentistry from other industries, I think is, fantastic. And I think, again, we spoke about that earlier. I find that really fascinating and interesting. I'm curious to ask you, what is it that fascinates you?
Fascinates me in the field of dentistry, yes,
or just generally in the field of business, field of dentistry. What is it what really gets your brain working in overdrive?
I guess I've adapted. I like change. I've learned to like change. I enjoy progress, and you coined it quite beautifully just before a while ago, Jesse, when you mentioned, look, sometimes you actually just don't do it for the financial rewards. You're doing it because you're learning particular things that you didn't know. And that excites me. The journey excites me a huge amount. It's not so much the ending, but the actual starting something, beginning with it, whether it's the $1 a day membership program, whether it's the $49 a week clear aligners to straight, or whether it's, opening a practice and starting it from zero and slowly building it with a system in place. That journey really does excite me. That's what keeps me going.
Yeah. Okay. I love that. I'm with you. I love the creation process. I love the learning process. And I really, applaud what you've put together because it's fascinating. It's interesting. And it's again, without, overusing that phrase, it's bringing things into dentistry that would otherwise not have been brought into dentistry. And I think that's great. And I think actually what I really appreciate that is it's a great service to the profession because it gets people thinking about things in a way that they may not otherwise have done so. So I think not only is it interesting and stimulating for you, but I think it's a tremendous service to the profession. So I think, I tip my hat to you for that, mate. I think that's fantastic.
Thank you.
As we wrap up, Safa, I wanted to ask you, what the future holds for you. Where do you see yourself? Where do you see the profession? Just a bit of, I suppose, gazing into the future. What's on the horizon for you? And do you see any particular trends that would be useful for people to know about?
I've delved into my own head, Jesse, to give my friends sometimes ask me, is it better to have multiple dental practices, for example, or to own one dental practice, or is it better to be an associate in a busy practice, or, open my own practice? My own friends ask me that. And I remember I used to have distinctive answers for all these questions and a very strong opinion. But as time has gone by, I really ask the question, there is really no particular right answer in any of that, because any of these models work very well, and dentistry is that, you can run particular models very well. You can have one dental practice. I have a friend who has a dental practice in Brisbane. He's had it for many years. He's very, very successful. Does very, very well, and probably does better than, my other friends who may have. The future, I guess, is a little bit unknown and sometimes hard to navigate with what is going on. But I do consider our profession. I've always considered myself very lucky to be a dentist, Jesse.
Yeah.
Very, very lucky. We are very lucky, and I have been grateful that I've had the opportunity to do dentistry, to help patients, and also to do business in dentistry. I think that's a really, really great thing that we have at our hand, and we should be very appreciative of it.
Yeah, I agree with you, actually, Safa. Everything in my life that's good has come as a direct consequence of being a dentist. My commercial outcomes, my marriage, I married a dentist, it's the cliche, dentist marrying dentist. I know it is a cliche. So therefore my kids, so I'm with you. I'm really appreciative of the dental profession. I think it's been incredibly rewarding in so many different ways, and it's so multifaceted, and there's so much variety and stimulation that can come from being a dentist and working in the dental profession or in the business of dentistry as well. Safa, I want to say thank you so much for taking the time to come and talk to us today. I've been looking forward to having the opportunity to meet you now for some time. A lot of the people that I know and respect in the dental industry and the profession more broadly, speak of you in such high terms and, with such warmth, affection, and with appreciation of the work that you do. And I can understand why. And so I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time, because I really, really have enjoyed talking to you, because it's an entrepreneurial journey as well as a clinical journey. It's a really rich and diverse background, and I'd love to come back and perhaps go for round 2 and we can explore a lot more. So thank you so much for taking the time today, mate.
Thank you very much. I'm very appreciative. Thank you very much, Jesse. I love listening to your podcast also. Thank you.
Thanks,
Learned
mate.
a lot.
Thank you, mate.
Have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Savvy Dentist podcast with Dr. Jesse Green. For more free tools and resources, join the free Facebook group. Visit drjessegreen.com/Facebook. And for more episodes, visit drjessegreen.com/savvydentist.